Thanks, everybody. Let me add my welcome to Pascal's for this annual Poetry Jamboree that seems to get bigger and more exciting every year. We'd like to thank the T.S. Eliot trustees, who are now the sole sponsors of the prize, and of course, we meet under the magnificent umbrella of the Poetry Book Society, without whom this wouldn't happen. So may I encourage you, if you're not already members, to join the Poetry Book Society. I've been a member for years and years, for decades. The Poetry Book Society started in 1954 and has been choosing poetry books of excellence ever since then. And I would encourage you to join. These awards have been going since 1993, and I've been lucky enough to present them for 5 years, although it seems to me that whenever I meet people, they pretend they've been going on longer than they have, which is a good thing. I met somebody the other day who thought they'd been going on since before T.S. Eliot was born, which is a wonderful thing. Somebody else said they'd found evidence in one of Scott Fitzgerald's first drafts of The Great Gatsby that he actually came along to one of these events, which is good. Also, Renaissance scholars have talked about the fact that it existed then, and evidence of this evening has been found on cave paintings in France, which just shows what a long history it's got and what a long future it will have. So each poet gets to read for 8 minutes. That's 8 poetry minutes, which may feel in a very good way like a lifetime. Sometimes, as you know, 8 minutes is too long, but 8 minutes just feels like a wonderful, wonderful lifetime. The winner of the T.S. Eliot Awards gets £20,000, 20,000 poetry pounds, which are like pounds, but better, so much better. Each nominated person gets 1,500 poetry pounds, which is almost like 20,000 poetry pounds. That's what they'll say, and it almost is. So we always encourage people to clap and whoop and shout, and sometimes people do bring rattles, which is a good thing. We like the poetry rattle. So our first poet is the wonderful Mark Doty. When I read through these books endlessly to try and work out what bits are actually the nub of the book, there's a fantastic line in Deep Lane, his new book, that says, "I say you run, darling. You tear up that hill." He's talking about his dog running up a hill, but I thought, actually, that's what this book is. It runs up a hill. It runs up the hill of poetry. It tears up the hill. In other words, it doesn't just run up the hill, it tears the hill up. It redrafts. What Mark Doty's book tells us, what it shows us, is that we can redraft a life. We can rewrite a life. There are so many poems in this book called Deep Lane. When I interviewed Mark a few months ago, he said that actually any poem in the book, and all the poems, could have been called Deep Lane, because that's what actually the poems are. They're deep lanes into the way that Mark thinks and into the way that we can appreciate him. So it's great, it's wonderful to start off with the great Mark Doty.
Thank you. I think Ian's the ideal host for practically anything. When I hear that voice, the combination of feeling consoled and cheered on is so delightful. What could be better? I'm going to read 2 poems for you, and I'm very grateful and honored to be here this evening, to be part of this event. And this first one, you will meet a character in the poem, my dog Ned, who is a golden retriever, and a prime example of his kind. Deep Lane. June 23rd, evening of the first fireflies. We're walking in the cemetery down the road, and I look up from my distracted study of whatever, an unfocused gaze somewhere a few feet in front of my shoes, and see that Ned has run on ahead, with the champagne plume of his tail held especially high, his head erect, which is often a sign that he has something he believes he is not allowed to have. And in the gathering twilight, what is it that is gathered? Who is doing the harvesting? I can make out that the long horizontal between his lovely jaws is one of the 4 stakes planted on the slope to indicate where the backhoe will dig a new grave. Of course, my impulse is to run after him, to replace the marker, out of respect for the rule that we won't desecrate the tombs, or at least for those who knew the woman whose name inks a placard in the rectangle claimed by the 4 poles of vanishing, 3 poles now, and how it's within their recollection their gathering shall live. Evening of memory, spark lamps in the grass. I stand and watch him go in his wild figure eights. I say, you run, darling. You tear up that hill. I read that poem earlier this year at a reading for the Royal Society of Literature, and some of the young women who work in the office took that final line to heart. So apparently now when anyone has a difficult day, they are told, you run, darling, you tear up that hill. This is a poem which begins as a meditation on what happens to us when our habits are broken, our routine taken away from us against our will. Habit, of course, gets a bad rep. We think that habit prevents us from seeing what's in front of us, that it seals our perception against the new. But there's really something to be said for knowing your routines, knowing your patterns, in order to be free to wander in the inner life. This, your home now. For years, I went to the Peruvian barbers on 18th Street. Comforting, welcome. The full coat rack, 3 chairs held by 3 barbers, eldest by the window, the middle one a slight fellow who spoke an oddly feminine Spanish, the youngest last, red-haired, self-consciously masculine, and in each of their mirrors, their children's photos, mildly smutty cartoons, postcards from Machu Picchu. I was happy in any chair, though I liked best the touch of the eldest, who'd rest his hand against my neck in a thoughtless, confident way. 10 years, maybe. One day, the powdery blue steel shutters pulled down over the windows and door, not to be raised again. They'd lost their lease. I didn't know how at a loss I'd feel. This haze around what I'd like to think the sculptural presence of my skull requires neither art nor science. But 2 haircuts on 7th, 1 on Dublin, nothing right. Then I hear my friend Marie laughing over my shoulder, saying, in your poems, there's always a then. And I think, is it a poem without a then? Dull early winter, back on 18th, up spiraling red in a cylinder of glass, and just below the line of sidewalk, a new sign, Willie's Barbershop. Dark hallway, glass door, and there is presumably Willie. When I tell him I used to go down the street, he says in an inscrutable accent, this your home now. Puts me in a chair, asks me what I want, and soon he's clipping and singing with the radio's Latin dance tune. That's when I notice Willie's walls, though he's been here all of a week, spangled with images hung in barbershops since the beginning of time. Lounge singers, near celebrities, random boxers, Italian boys, Puerto Rican, caught in the hour of their beauty, though they'd scowl at the word. Victors cheering over a trophy, won for what? Frames already dusty, at slight angles. Here, it's clear, forever. Are barbershops like aspens, each sprung from a common root 10,000 years old? Sons of one father, flashing fighters and starlets to shield the tenderness at their hearts. Our guardian Willie defies time. His chair, our ferry boat. And we go down in the trance of touch and the skull buzz drone, singing cranial nerves in the direction of peace. And so I understand that in the back of this nothing building on 18th Street, I've found that door ajar before, in daylight, when it shouldn't be, some forgotten bulb left burning in a shaft of my uncharted nights. The men I have outlived await their turns, the fevered and wasted, whose mothers and lovers scattered their ashes and gave away their clothes. 20 years, and their names tumble into a numb well, though in truth I have not forgotten one of you. May I never forget one of you, these layers of men, arrayed in their no longer breathing ranks. Willie, I have not lived well in my grief for them. I have lugged this weight from place to place as though it were mine to account for, and today I sit in your good chair in the 6th decade of my life. And if your back door is a threshold of the kingdom of the lost, yours is a steady hand on my shoulder. Go down into the still waters of this chair and come up refreshed, ready to face the avenue. Maybe I do believe we will not be left comfortless. After everything comes tumbling down, or you tear it down and stumble in the Shadow Valley trenches of the moon, there's still a decent chance at a barbershop, salsa on the radio, the instruments of renewal wielded effortlessly, and who'd have thought, for you, Willie, if he is Willie, fusses much longer over my head than my head merits. which allows me to be grateful without qualification. Could I be a little satisfied? There's a man who loves me. Our dogs, 15, 20 more good years, if I'm a bit careful. That's what I haven't written. It's sunny out, though cold. After I tip Willie, I'm going down to Jane Street to a coffee shop I like, and then I'm going to write this poem. Then
Thank you very much, Mark. I think the people who've been to these events before will know that one of the oddest things is the long walk across the stage. And even stranger this year, because we've got these banners here, we're actually walking across the shadow of T.S. Eliot each time. So I think I might try and vary the walk and try and redraft my walk across the stage each time in homage to T.S.